All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to Kingston Writers Fest. My name is Ara McCauley. I'm the Artistic Director of the festival, and I'm pleased to present our second event of tonight called Love is in the Air, an Unconventional Romance. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which the festival customarily takes place and where I am tonight is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. We gratefully acknowledge these Indigenous nations for their ongoing guardianship of this land. We agree to peaceably share in responsibility for stewardship of this land, its waters, and all of its biodiversity. All those who come to live and work here are responsible for honoring these relationships in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. We hope that you followed the sponsorship acknowledgement video that was playing before the event started. I'd like to thank in particular the Canada Council, Canadian Heritage, Ontario Arts Council, and the City of Kingston and Kingston Arts Council for their ongoing support of the festival. Well, we're grateful to these organizations and individuals who support the festival. For tonight, I'd like to thank the author patron for Genki Ferguson, which is Ann-Maureen and Peter Owens, and our arts partner for the event, which is Kingston Canadian Film Festival. This event is an hour long and includes a question and answer period. Feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box that you'll find at the bottom of your screen at any point during the event. If you'd like to support the author by picking up a copy of his book, our official bookseller Novel Idea has copies available now to purchase in store, by phone, or online. Now I'm delighted to introduce this event's presenter, Marc Garniss. Marc is the director of Kingston Canadian Film Festival, the world's largest all-Canadian film festival. Marc manages KPP Concerts, aka Kingston Punk Productions, an independent concert promotion collective with his wife Moira. He's an avid festival goer and enjoys experiencing new events whenever possible, with recent trips pre-COVID to the Edinburgh International Film Festival, Pop Montreal, and the Orlando Fringe Festival. A self-proclaimed Leafs fan, musician, he plays a mean guitar, and of course, Canadian movie buff. Please welcome Marc.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marc Garniss. I am the director of the Kingston Canadian Film Festival, and I'm just making sure I'm on the screen here. Yes, I am. Great. Okay. I feel like I've spent the past 18 months trying to teach my parents how to work Zoom, and they've probably gotten a lot better at it than I have. So anyways, it's great to be here. I think this is my first digital Writers Fest, and miss seeing everybody's faces in person, but I feel like that's all coming back pretty soon. But nonetheless, we're really stoked to be here tonight with Genki Ferguson, and had the pleasure of just finishing up his book the other day after a lot of like heavy reading that I've been doing, I think, over the pandemic. So this was a delight to get to. So I'm glad that I was invited to take part in this event tonight. So just a quick intro here. Genki Ferguson, he's an emerging Canadian author, having just completed his debut novel, Satellite Love. Fluent in Japanese and capable of making a decent sushi roll, Genki was a recipient of the 2017 Helen Pitt Award for Visual Arts, and recently completed a degree in film production while working part-time at Book Warehouse, an indie store in Vancouver. Ruth Ozeki, author of A Tale of the Time Being, wrote, "Satellite Love is one of those rare and affecting novels that will leave you breathless, charmed, deeply thoughtful. A beautiful rumination on sentience, imagination, impermanence, and friendship, Genki Ferguson has written a story that lives on the precarious and satisfying edge of melancholy and exuberance." Please welcome Genki Ferguson.
Hello, hi Marc. Thanks for that lovely intro.
Thanks. I hope everybody got all that. I feel like my Zoom was maybe I feel like I was sort of lost there for about 10 seconds before we started.
I always feel a little bit guilty when I get people to read my little bio there, because I'm just starting it off with a lie. Like, this says I can make a decent sushi roll. In reality, like when you're writing your author bio, you need to kind of pad it out. I'm a little bit new to this whole thing. Didn't have a lot of books, no chapbooks, no nothing in the background. So I mean, I got fired from that sushi job. I think like a big part of my identity is that I'm not great at making sushi, but I'll take it.
You can
Thanks for
always
the intro,
revise
Marc.
it. Yeah, you can always revise
Yeah,
it
that'll be
as
the
you
next
go.
book. Genki Ferguson is terrible at making sushi.
Well, if it's any consolation, I actually now hate the Toronto Maple Leafs, so that bio is a bit dated for me too. So
Oh
it's
no.
yeah, I've got some trauma there.
It's always a painful thing when a favorite team of yours, when you start to feel yourself losing them,
Yeah. I'll come around. I just need a few more weeks for the hockey season starts. Anyways.
It is what it is.
Yeah, well, it would have been nice to meet in person, but I think we're all getting pretty used to this online thing. And I was chatting with you a little bit before we went live about you doing some of the other virtual Writers' Fests across the world. It seemed like so just because I know Kingstonians always love hearing people talk about their hometown. Have you ever been to Kingston before? I just thought I'd ask.
I have not, but I'd love to. I mean, everyone I've talked to, especially in the festival and kind of like corresponding with, has been really very lovely. I'm sure you guys have some great people and bookstores there. So yeah, maybe it's on the cards in the future.
Yeah. Good film school here and a good indie bookshop downtown, Novel Idea, who sponsors this festival every year. And yeah, Writers' Fest is really cool. So yeah, hopefully we can have you back in person for the next book.
I would be honored. I would be honored.
Cool. So we've asked Genki to read from Satellite Love. So I don't know what you're going to read, but I'm sure whatever it's going to be is going to be great. So I'll just leave it with you to read whatever you've prepared, Genki.
Cool. Thank you, Marc. Thanks again for the intro and all that. Yeah. Hello, Genki Ferguson here, author of Satellite Love. Yeah, I guess as usual, we'll start it off with a little bit of a reading for people who haven't read it or have read it and just want to hear my shaking, mumbling voice fight through the first chapter. So I'll start with chapter 2, I suppose, the first satellite chapter. When Leo, the satellite who Anna, the main character, falls in love with, gains sentience and starts to gaze down on Earth. So here it is, chapter 2, from the perspective of the satellite. It was during my third revolution around the Earth that I developed this creeping suspicion that I may not actually exist. I knew I had a consciousness. That was the only thing I could really know for sure. But other than that, everything was up in the air. I appeared to be floating in a definite direction, but couldn't quite understand how I was flying exactly. Even stranger, I was 73.2% sure I didn't possess a body at all. It seemed as though I was made of a metal instead of flesh, a somewhat shocking realization. I'd never experienced anything like this before. In fact, I couldn't remember a previous life to begin with. This is where things started to get tricky. I felt tired, that was for sure, as though I'd been circling this world for decades. And yet, I could only remember the last day or so. A quick survey of the void in front of me confirmed that I was, indeed, utterly alone, save for some cosmic dust. Dust, unfortunately, is not a great conversationalist, so there was no one I could ask about who I was or why I was here. I held some sort of ability to view everything on Earth. I could even see through walls and into roofs and homes, but I had no way to communicate whatsoever. On top of that, numbers came instinctively to me. I knew that I was 577 kilometers above the Earth, for example. I appeared to be flying over a neighborhood of sorts, on the outskirts of a half-abandoned city. For a short period of time, I wondered if I'd died and was now waiting in the afterlife for whatever came next. Perhaps space was a waiting room, and my body, my heart, was somewhere else, being weighed against a feather or something. Or maybe my metal body was an incubation chamber for the soul, if such a thing as a soul exists in the first place. Who's to say that the gods didn't have technology? A pretty simple solution if you asked me, although I did experience a very minor, complete nervous breakdown at the thought of being dead. I had a vague understanding of reincarnation, though I had no idea where my understanding came from, and assumed I was waiting for my next cycle on Earth. One thing I remember about reincarnation, and I use remember here loosely, is that with every cycle of rebirth, you grow wiser. You carry over a bit of your past experiences from one life to the next. I hope this meant an innate wisdom and not any hard knowledge, as It didn't seem like my past self had left me with much information. Was I here as punishment? Perhaps I'd done something wrong in a previous life and had been left here to contemplate actions I could no longer recall. I didn't know the past me, but I knew I couldn't trust him. The punishment for an immoral life was reincarnation as a beast in the next, leading me to wonder if I was on my way to being turned into an animal. I didn't think I'd have a problem with that. Staring at the earth below, I could get a decent sample size of what such a life would be like. Judging from what I saw, animals outnumbered Homo sapiens by quite a bit, roughly 8.7 million species to one. My plan was to live out 12 or so years as a dog, die with a clear conscience, and get right back to being human. I was feeling pretty confident about my future until I realized that if I was being punished, I wouldn't come back as something pettable and well-loved like a Shiba Inu, but as something horrible and slimy like a snail or a gulper eel. A fate worse than death, and I could say that as confidence as someone who has died, presumably multiple times. I decided to curb the armchair philosophy for the time being, mostly due to my lack of armchair, and re-examine what I knew so far. 1. I appeared to be floating in space. 2. I could view the earth and the people below with absolute clarity. And 3. I did not possess a human form. In all honesty, the list only raised more questions. Nearly everyone I saw in that city was asleep at the time, save for a drunken office worker here, a late-night truck driver there. Their soft, fleshy forms seemed quaint to me. Without metal plating of any sort, how would they defend themselves from space debris or meteors? Perhaps there were other things to worry about down on Earth. One girl in particular, though, caught my attention. A small, frail thing, alone in her room just as I was alone, up in space. Among all those humans, she was the only one looking back at me. She was leaning precariously out of the window of her home, as though being a half-meter closer to the sky might make a difference. The wind picked up below, and I worried that she might fall, but she held her position, unmoving, staring upwards. The girl's thin hair fanned against her face, her cloudy breath peeking out into the nighttime cold. I wondered if she alone could provide the answers that I was searching for. And that is the end of chapter 2, the first chapter from the perspective of the satellite.
Yeah, and there's four, if I've counted them all correctly, there's 4 perspectives throughout the novel, right? There's Anna,
yes,
and then the satellite, and then there's 2 others as well, right? And they kind of
yeah, exactly. So there's Anna, the lonely girl in southern Japan. There's Leo, as she calls him, the satellite which flies above her home. And there's also Anna's grandfather, whose memories are slowly fading. And then Soki, a kind of strange, perhaps a little bit mysterious boy in Anna's class, who's the son of a Shinto priest.
Yeah, so they're all like, doesn't seem like there's a ton of characters in the book, but there are four distinct voices that I forget if they're all back to back to back to back and how you present them. I don't think they are, but yeah, the characters that we do meet in the book are super interesting and all kind of going through their own sort of isolated world, I guess. So how did you come up with these 4? How did you decide on these 4 characters to be, I guess, sort of like the narrators in the novel?
Yeah, I mean, there's when you write a story, this isn't my metaphor, but I don't remember where I read it or where I initially saw it. But there's maybe 2 ways you can say that you write a story. You can call one way is like watercolor, and one way is like sculpting, like carving a marble statue. So the one way you can do it is you start off with a block and you can envision the great idea in it and you slowly chip away, kind of revealing the form underneath. And then the other way is to maybe start with a sketch and then slowly layer, I don't know if anyone's done watercolor, but you slowly layer kind of panels, blocks of paint, gradually building it up. And with Satellite Love, it was definitely the case of the watercolor. So with Anna, Anna's a kind of a complicated character. She's troubled. She's definitely troubled. And deeply imaginative, but also not one that's entirely just vulnerable. She a lot of her problems are her own fault. and she's not always the most likable. And in order to kind of build up a character like that, it started to just come naturally that we need to peek into other characters' worlds, start to see how other people were viewing Anna. So with just Anna's voice, it was getting very intense and very insular. So bringing in those other voices kind of helped that.
For sure. Yeah, and it's so there's different times in the book that you start to question how real some of these voices and some of these characters are, and there's it explicitly says at one point in the book that Leo is fictional, but then there's other points in the novel where you're kind of he puts a certain percentage on, I think, him being human, like 75.4
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah, he talks in numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean that I'd say that was about my percentage as well at the end of the novel. I was like, was Leo just part of Anna's imagination, or has he sort of branched off somehow and kind of become his own person?
Yeah.
And I would say I was about 75.4% sure of one of those
That's
things,
good.
but yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, writing is kind of like play in that sense too, and I used to watch these events, these author events with very extreme, very important people, and she's won a Nobel and all that. And I'd hear them talk about their books and about their characters and maybe the unresolved mysteries. And I'd occasionally hear an author say something like, "Oh, well, I don't even know the answer myself." And I'd hear that, and I'd always be suspicious. I'm like, "Just give me the answer. You're being coy. There's no need for that." But after writing Satellite Love, I kind of realized that is quite true. So yeah, a lot of the characters in Satellite Love, especially a story where, explicitly half of the story is imaginary. A lot of these characters do exist in Anna's head, but then the further you go along, the barriers start to kind of blur. And not even I fully know myself towards the end, which characters were fully imaginary and which characters were fully real, and who started to cross the barrier into different worlds. I think there's a line there even where it's like someone had smudged the ink on the page.
I think the title of this event suggests that there's a romance going on here, and
Love is in the air.
Yeah, love is in the air, and there's certainly an element of that in the book. So Anna and Leo. Sorry, go ahead, Genki.
I just got the pun. Yeah, I finally got it. Love is literally in the air. The satellite is in the air. Oh, yeah. Very clever.
And I wasn't really, I guess, thinking of it as so much of
subconscious.
Yeah. But the one thing that really struck me about this book was the time period, I guess, in which it takes place, which was just before the turn of the millennium. I think it takes place in like 99 or 2000.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so I'm just thinking of like the way romance typically develops now, and people meet one another is through things like Tinder and eHarmony and social media and all those things. So this was sort of on, if I'm getting my dates right, I think this was a little bit before any of that stuff happened. So like, I don't know if people were really meeting on social media back then. So I don't know if social media if eHarmony and Tinder had existed, if Anna's problems may have gone away and it would have been a lot easier on her. But was there?
I wonder if. Was there a reason for the time period?
Yeah, that's what I mean. My long-winded question there was there a reason for the time period?
I wonder if maybe the problems would have been worse if she had the boon of social media and online dating with her. But yeah, no, definitely. And the time period is it's both like everything's kind of an artistic choice when you're writing, but it's both practical and also thematic choice there, setting it in 1999. On one hand, writing pre-internet makes it very easy. There's certain moments in a book where, if someone just texted someone, or if this happened, or if Anna had this. So on a practical level, setting it back then definitely helped. Also, just thematically, you're kind of tapping into a bit of the nostalgia there. I mean, we look at the past romantically, and Satellite Love is a romantic story. But Satellite Love is also a story of in-betweens. Like we mentioned, some characters are halfway imaginary and halfway real. The reader too, ideally, your opinion of Anna is always changing. You kind of, on one hand, feel bad for her, but on the other hand, maybe even afraid of her. And then, we'll get into it, I'm sure, as we talk more, but all the other characters are all halfway between worlds. So 1999 was deliberately chosen in that regard as well, where we're kind of right on the cusp of the 21st century, right, beginning to form a new world. And then here's this teenage girl kind of lost on her own.
For sure. Just as you were chatting that out, I just remembered where, I don't know why I was thinking of this, but where I was at the turn of the millennium was actually in Vancouver. I went with my brother as he was about to start Vancouver Film School.
Oh, that's great.
I don't know if that's the specific school that you were at for film production or not, but I just remembered where I was at that when we were in a hotel and we were up at midnight at the turn of the millennium, and I was in Vancouver. So anyways,
that's a no, but everyone remembers, right? Everyone remembers.
Totally, yeah.
But no, I didn't go to VFS, but VFS is a great school here, or Vancouver Film School. I went to Emily Carr University, which is the maybe less practical choice. Emily Carr University is just an art school here in Vancouver. It's a good school. I really enjoyed my time there, but like every art school cliche kind of rolled into one. So it's a very free, experimental time.
Okay, well, that's good.
I just graduated a couple years ago, but yeah.
Nice. Yeah, like the timing of the book definitely does evoke nostalgia for sure in that pre-social media world where, maybe I think back at those times and I'm just like, I was hanging out with people more face to face. This is easy to say during a pandemic, of course, but, like hanging out with people more face to face and just thinking of like nephews maybe not being behind screens all the time and, maybe more like Anna out building spaceships and doing things that kids are supposed to do. But I don't know, maybe it was a time when we felt less isolated, but yet isolation is one of the primary themes in the book. Is there, like, why does Anna feel so isolated in this pre-social media world?
Well, that's, because it's interesting too, because I've had a couple of people ask, like, oh, Satellite Love came out right in the pandemic. And a lot of the themes really feel like they resonate. And clearly I didn't write it in the pandemic. Books have quite a long lead time. But I think what Satellite Love speaks to is just a general kind of larger cultural malaise. It's a lot of these feelings we have, a lot of this kind of feelings of disconnect and isolation and loneliness. They're really only exaggerated by the pandemic. They were already there. These aren't new feelings. And I think, everyone would have their own answer, but I would say that maybe the turn of the century would have been the beginning of that, right when we're starting to go digital, right when we're starting to produce faster than we can consume. I guess that's been going on much longer. But so that's it's in a sense to tapping into that nostalgia, the very beginning of this kind of, I don't want to say cultural decline, but maybe that's a really grim way you could put it.
Yeah. No, it really works for sure. The whole book evoked a nostalgic time for me for sure, and I think I have enough years pre-social media and post-social media where I'm kind of right in the middle there almost. So it definitely evoked nostalgia for me. How just it was to interact kind of before social media and just some of the things that kids were doing. I just see like nephews now that are just so glued to screens all the time. It was really refreshing to see Anna build that spaceship.
Yeah, kind of gung-ho. Yeah,
for sure. So one of my favorite characters in the entire book is I guess not one of the four main characters, but was the general actually, who I guess you could say had a bit of a minor role in it, but you've painted a very detailed portrait of him as he's isolated as well, kind of like a nationalistic ex-military guy who's he's lost his hearing and sight, and Anna regularly visits him in his nursing home. I guess what interested me about this character was you introduced some other themes that I thought were maybe related to things like meditation and Buddhism, and despite that all he's gone through, arguably he's the most and maybe the most isolated character in the book, he also seems the most at peace with himself, and Anna seems very attracted to that and very attracted to him. Is that something in the general that the character that Anna is attracted to?
Yeah, and definitely all throughout the book, kind of I guess as a contrast to, she describes Sakita, the city that they live in, as a kind of hollow, empty place, and it's certainly written that way. It's this kind of city that's been crushed by just the economic bubble bursting, you know, mass population leaving. So it's like a hollow city, physically empty as well as maybe spiritually. And running through the current of the book while we're going through this post-industrial world, it's also this kind of these themes of especially Japanese spirituality or Asian spirituality, let's say, which I think has quite an allure here in the West as well. And we've seen recent years with like how mindfulness has become a huge trend, or people are starting to meditate more, which I think is generally quite a positive thing. So yeah, along with Shintoism, which is the big kind of presence, spiritual presence there with Soki, there are definitely Buddhist undertones as well, especially with the general. And as for Anna's attraction to the general, I think it also plays into a larger question of we need heroes, maybe, and you could argue that this is maybe one of the things that's led to such an isolated world. But Anna's searching for an idol. She's searching for a father figure. She's searching for a hero, and she finds that in the general. And as you know, it doesn't necessarily end as she would want it to end, but there's definitely the allure of a powerful personality, and that's who she sees in him. Yeah.
I think my favorite passage in the book, and maybe this is what I don't know if you also feel this way, but it's, I guess, what you'd call the postamble at the end of the book. Yeah, it's when I think that those are words that are coming from Soki, when it says it comes quietly sometimes, like the chirping of a cicada, like a light layer of snow, like a signal still pulsing so far above. Mari. And I just had to flip back to the start of the book just to see what the first line was. And the first line of the book is, when I close my eyes, I see satellites. So yeah, when I was just kind of looking at the opening and closing lines, it resonated to me as if somebody was getting into the act of meditation by closing their eyes and taking this journey, taking this trip. And by the end, through this Mari, had attained some sort of enlightenment or contentment through just the repetition of that word, which is often seen in meditation. So I don't know if I went way too far down that rabbit hole.
No.
Or if that was
that's actually a really interesting. No, you know what? I've never been asked that before, so that's really interesting to talk about. Yeah, the Ajimari-ken chant there. That's an old kind of Shinto. Shintoism is a religion in Japan. It's an animalist religion, one of the oldest surviving. I believe it is the oldest surviving practiced, organized animalist religion there. There's still shrines. There's still practicing priests, and a lot of that kind of information has been lost to time. With Buddhism, a lot has been preserved, especially with recent discoveries like the Dunhuang caves. I know I'm not pronouncing that right. So there's been with Buddhism, at least, there's definitely been a continued tradition as people have been able to keep the mantras and the sutras and the old documents. But Shintoism was never quite organized in that way. So a lot of that's quite sparse. And the Ajimari-ken chant comes from a very specific, I guess you'd call it sect. And it's not written in the text, but that's the sect that Soki would belong to. So yeah, you could call it meditation in a sense, and that's where in Japan especially, Buddhism and Shintoism, there's quite a lot of interplay there. And in Buddhism, it sounds like you know quite a little bit, at least, or quite a bit about Buddhism. They talk a lot about just the presence of words, at least in certain schools, on how words themselves can take spirit or can have power on their own, especially, well, I won't get into that. So yeah, you could definitely say that there's kind of a tie there between the Shintoism and the Buddhism there. As for the whole book being within a moment of meditation, that certainly wasn't intentional, but you could definitely see it that way. I mean, it is written in past tense with Anna somewhere unknown in the future, kind of recalling these events that she's gone through. I'm always happy when I get to talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I mean, I don't want to maybe go even further down this rabbit hole, but I was just thinking about things like consciousness, which is obviously a big part of meditation, and how that might relate to some of the different characters in the book that you're kind of wondering, is this Anna's mom? Is this just in Anna's mind, or are these actually multiple characters in the book? And so, yeah, I kind of had a good think on it one night, and I was just thinking, this could be looked at as being a single consciousness kind of coming through multiple characters. But anyways, I'd love to probably chat a bit more about that with you maybe some other time, or I'll get on the chat at the end and I'll pretend like I'm somebody else and ask that question.
Go for it. But that is a good point about the ending and the beginning are meant to be tied together. And I do recommend, if you read the book and you can still stomach a little bit more, go back and reread the first chapter. And you said it was from Soki, the last chapter. And I'm not going to agree or disagree. This is one of those, even I don't know, but the chapter heading is missing. So it could be anyone who's read that last little epilogue there. Yeah.
I originally thought it was somebody else. And I originally thought it was somebody else. And I went back and looked again. I was like, I think it was Soki, based on just how I saw it laid out, I guess. But that was not
one of the many mysteries.
Yeah, it was not my original thought. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, there was just I guess when I was just doing some digging online as well, just to sort of take the conversation in a little bit different down a different road here. I saw a lot of people just commenting on the cover of the book, which is honestly something I don't normally see a lot of in the literary world.
Yeah.
I know when I was a kid, I would buy a lot of my CDs based on how cool the artwork was, and so it's nice to have that tangible, like really nice artwork that you can hang on to. But yeah, I was seeing comment after comment of the artwork here, and I don't know if you just want to talk a little bit about that.
No, it's a beautiful. I don't feel at all embarrassed saying this because it was entirely out of my hands. It's a beautiful, like, physical book. And it's all thanks to Emma Dolan, who's the designer. She did the cover art as well. And yeah, I mean, there's, like everything in publishing and writing too, there's an awful lot of trust. So I sent over a couple covers that I quite liked, and then Emma Dolan, the designer, just completely blew me out of the water with this. And throughout the book, let me see if I can find one. I always forget to bookmark this. But throughout the book, there are little illustrations as well. Mm-hmm. I think partially because Satellite Love, it takes place in Japan. So maybe there's certain cultural elements that not everyone's familiar with. For instance, one passage, Soki talks about these lion dogs that sit by the shrine, and one lion dog has their mouth open and the other has their mouth closed. The idea being the beginning of everything, there's an ah noise, and at the end of everything, there's a So throughout the book, there are little illustrations, and here's one of them there. Yeah. So that was also Emma Dolan. Yeah, just a beautiful book. I'm a big fan of the French folds too. That's just a personal bias.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, and I think just the picture of Anna on the front cover plays into some of those themes of that we were chatting about as well. Just meditation and consciousness, and what's the one? There's one book that I read not so long ago by Deepak Chopra. What's he call it? You Are the Universe, or I think it's maybe I might have got that a little bit wrong, but it's something like that. So I know when I was looking at Anna here, I was like, oh, the universe is inside the silhouette there.
Yeah.
So that was part of me going down that rabbit hole even a bit further.
No, I was absolutely thrilled. It captures the feeling of the book so great, and even just like the specific blue they used. Yeah, shout out to all the designers out there, but especially Emma Dolan.
For sure, yeah. Just so I guess while we're on the topic of images with the artwork and the illustrations, maybe we can just quickly loop back to your time as a filmmaker, which is, I guess, a little more interesting for me because I do have the film background with the film festival. Writers Fest tends to pair me with authors that also have a foot in the film world. So are you allowed to discuss if you're doing anything with this novel that might be related to film or TV down the road, or is that a conversation
I'll leave that kind of stuff open-ended, but I mean, personally, no. For me, I'm pretty well into the kind of writing side of the world, or side of things. I'm pretty focused on the next book. So yeah, if something were to happen, it would be, I would entrust it to a team of film creatives. But yeah, I did go to film school. I went to Emily Carr, really great 4 years of my life, if nothing else for the fact that I got to sit around all day and think about art. So then, only get an excuse to do that for a couple of years. Yeah, Emily Carr, and I think there was definitely a benefit in studying something maybe a little bit unrelated to creative writing there. I went to Emily Carr. My specialty was actually in film editing. I did a lot of documentary work there too. And yeah, there's certain, when you're studying film and when you're studying filmmaking, and especially at a film school, about twice a year, twice a year. So once a semester, you make a film. Usually about 10 minutes long, can be pretty much anything. At least at Emily Carr, it was pretty free form. And then everyone sits down and dissects it. And in a good class, tears it apart. In a bad class, just say banal, just banal niceties about it. But you still learn just kind of the general structure of story and of character and what it takes to make a compelling narrative, to make compelling characters, and also what works and what doesn't. And that was kind of one of the sensibilities I tried to bring to Satellite Love. I wanted it to be almost filmic in that sense, where it's easy to visualize and kind of maybe moves at a pace that's a little bit brisk, like a screenplay.
So just as far as like the writing process for Satellite Love, were you still in film school when you were writing this book?
Yeah, I was in film. Well, let's see. Yeah, I was in film school when I wrote the first. Well, I was in film school for the whole thing. I was in film school when I wrote the book. I was in film school when I got the publishing contract with the amazing Anita Chong, who's my editor, who's just brilliant. So yeah, I was in film school for the whole shebang, I guess. I edited it over the pandemic, which definitely added a flavor of intensity to the book, early pandemic at least. But yeah, I was basically I was neglecting my studies is what I was doing, Marc.
So you released I guess that's one thing I wanted to ask you, but I didn't know you're so young and emerging and a new author. It maybe don't have a ton of experience to draw on in terms of this, but was it weird releasing your book during the pandemic? I don't know if you'd have a point of comparison, but
I mean, definitely this is my first book, so I don't really have anything to compare it to. Well, I guess my father, Will Ferguson, who wrote The Finder right there most recently. So I guess I've seen him launch books before, and I've seen like the in-person events and all that. But personally, this is my first book. So doing the whole Zoom thing, the whole online thing wasn't too rough. I know it could be quite tough for a lot of writers, because you spend all this time writing and you're all by yourself and you're in your head. The least you want to do is get to meet your readers face to face. And I think one of the reasons why I was able to why it wasn't too bad for me is that I actually worked at a bookstore for the longest time while I was writing Satellite Love. So I got to meet quite a few readers. They come by to the store. Shout outs to Book Warehouse, an indie bookstore in Vancouver. So that was quite nice. People would come by, buy the book, or come back later and chat about it. So far, no harsh critics there. I think it's face to face is a bit different. So it's quite nice. I didn't feel alone, I'd say. I got to meet quite a few readers.
Yeah. Did you actually ever did you ever have to do that transaction where somebody was buying your book and you were maybe ringing it through the till and they didn't know that you were actually the writer?
Yeah, that's a very coy feeling, nice book. Yeah, I have done that before. And also, of course, when you work at a bookstore and you've written a book, that's all they're gonna sell. So I'm top bestseller at a very specific store in Vancouver. It's a privilege that I get to enjoy.
Yeah. What's the name, for just quick shout out purposes? What's the name of the bookstore?
A Book Warehouse, specifically on Broadway.
Cool.
It's a chain, indie bookstore chain, but the one I work at is Book Warehouse on Broadway.
Awesome. Novel Idea is our indie bookstore here in Kingston, and I know they support the Writers Fest and a lot of community arts groups. And from my understanding, your book is available down there, so everybody should make their way down there when they can and pick it up from Novel Idea.
Shop local, shop independent.
For sure. And they often in the past would have writers in there doing readings, and through actually my job in the music world, we actually had a West Coast author musician in there doing a reading a while ago. So hopefully for the next book we can get you into Novel Idea.
I'd love to.
Yeah. So just, I guess maybe last kind of pandemic related question, did you feel like any pressure to kind of churn out a lot of content during, I know for musicians in film, they were kind of at a standstill as far as live events went. So I know there was a lot of musicians have said that there was a lot of pressure for them to, you know, create their next album, or the director, write your next film. Did you feel that at all, or?
If there was any pressure, it would have been just coming from myself. Everyone, you know, is very supportive and patient. I guess, do you mean like in terms of writing the next book, or in terms of like promoting Silent Love, or just in general?
No, I guess I meant more like, did you feel any pressure to sort of get your second book all queued up and ready to go, or even your third book? Were you just like, I can't go out to Kingston Writers Fest, so I need to make better use of this time by creating? Yeah.
I suppose so. I do decently well under pressure, so it wasn't altogether unpleasant. It was kind of nice to just have an excuse to sit and write all day. Writing's also a compulsion. Like, I didn't really have a choice. I get irritable if I'm not writing something. So
yeah.
So I was writing anyway, just another way to pass the time. And
for sure, yeah.
If anything, was quite nice. It had to give me a focus.
Yeah. Do you have a routine that you like to get into when you write? Like, do you have go to any specific space, or is there like, I know for me, when I was at Queen's, if I had to write an essay, there was always an exact space and an exact table that I needed to go to finish that work.
Yeah. Well, Satellite Love, I wrote pretty much everywhere and anywhere, because I was a student and I was also working. So I was just kind of carving away time whenever I could on a little iPad on the bus, for instance, or wherever. Could get like feedback from the guy looking over my shoulder next to me. But then the pandemic hits. So when I'm editing, obviously I'm not really going to like coffee shops or this or that, which are my favorite places to be normally. But here's kind of a funny story. I was editing Satellite Love. Being able to edit your book professionally is just a huge privilege. But it's also a very long process, and I don't think that's a secret at all. And you're reading your own words over and over again. It's hard to understand what you're saying anymore. Especially if I was only ever at my desk in the apartment that I was confined to every day, especially back in like March 2020. So I started to like carve out nooks in my apartment. I had a little balcony there, and I like swept off the, what's it called? Well, I guess the floor, put a little like kind of bamboo, like a rug almost, or I don't know, like a mat down and a little desk. And I don't know, I tried to like fool myself into thinking I was not in my apartment. So that's how I edited it. I was moving every 2 hours.
And you kind of you briefly mentioned it, and I didn't necessarily want to make it a big talking point here, but your dad is Will Ferguson, who's won a Giller Prize and is well known in the literary community. I don't know if it would be him or maybe somebody else, but is there somebody that you like to bounce your ideas off of, or your go-to kind of be like, hey, am I on the right track here? What do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely talked to my dad quite a bit about writing. But also we kind of have like an unspoken rule between us where we don't talk about what we're working on until it's done. Mostly because things change all the time. I'll be like hyping up a really cool scene, and then I have to cut it, or it doesn't make sense anymore. But also kind of the more you talk about doing something, the less likely you are to actually do it. At least that's our personal theory there. So I didn't actually tell him that I was writing Satellite Love until I'd finished it. I finished a draft at least, but definitely, once I had a draft working done, we talked about it. Same with my present book. I haven't really talked to him about it much at all. Just because, I guess just because I think when you're writing, it's important to keep kind of creative intensity, finish it with your vision. And then once you're done is the time to get other people's ideas bouncing off of it and kind of picking it apart. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, I think I could talk to you for another hour here, but I feel like I should share some of this hour with some other people. So I think Ara's going to come back on here and maybe help facilitate some of the questions. And if need be, I have more here, but maybe give the audience a chance to weigh in. Yeah.
So just a reminder to everyone that if you'd like to ask a question, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and you can type in your questions there. I have to say, I had a little bit of nerdy delight that you enjoyed the pun in the title of the event that I made.
Was that you?
That was
you?
Yeah.
That's off. Well done. I realized it live. I was like, wait a second. That's so clever. Yeah.
I might have giggled as I was coming up with it. So
nice. That's the best kind of joke is the one that makes yourself laugh. So well done.
So I do have a question here from Liz. She says, Genki, thoughtful books like the one you've written often impart ideas or lessons to the readers. On reflection, do you think the book gave back to you any significant ideas or lessons you didn't anticipate?
Well, first of all, thank you, Liz. Thanks for reading, and also, sorry, I'm gonna have to. There we are. Thanks for reading and for the thoughtful question. I guess lessons that I didn't anticipate. Everyone has their own process. At least for me, and at least with Satellite Love, the kind of greater themes or questions definitely came after having written the initial or come up with the initial idea and the plot. And what I realized as I was writing Satellite Love and I was coming up with these characters and these events, which are sometimes happy, sometimes sad, is that the book is really just about compassion. Specifically, and maybe that sounds, well, I don't want to say cheesy, but it compassion in an almost radical sense where, and I do talk about this from time to time, but with Anna, she's a difficult character and not everyone's able to get on board with her. And that was almost the point. Like, I understood while writing Anna that I was going to lose some people, and that wasn't something that I was necessarily afraid of or worried of, because there's, you have to push the boundary. And I think often with people, when we read books or we encounter media or when we see people in real life who are maybe in pain or pitiful, or we need them to be lower than us in order to feel like we can help someone, we need to feel that we have power over them a lot of the time, or maybe more commonly. But the reality is often much more complicated like that. And often, as in the case of Anna, these people who need help are the ones who are often the ones who are difficult to deal with, or may not be the most friendly or easy to see kind of eye to eye with kind of people. And then, I guess I just wanted to write a story that resolves with compassion in maybe a very extreme way even, but ultimately about compassion. Thank you, Liz.
We have another question from Marta. She asks, do people or at work or friends influence any characters in your new book?
Hi, Marta. So Marta is a coworker of mine. We work at the same bookstore. So I would say no, not at all.
That's a loaded
I don't think I've ever been influenced by any friends or any people. No. Let's see. Do people at work or friends influence any characters in your new book? Characters are definitely conglomerations of the many people you meet in life. So I couldn't say that like Anna or Satellite or Leo or the grandfather or any one person. They're definitely an accumulation of many people. Especially at the bookstore, though, I think what was more valuable was just being around people who love books and talking about stories. My favorite thing to ask at the beginning of every Monday is, what's everyone reading, or what are you all reading? And we all have very different tastes at the store. And just hearing what's working and what's not, and what drives people to character and what doesn't, that was extremely valuable to me. I didn't anticipate it being so important. So yeah, there's my answer to you, Marta.
Right. Do we have any other questions from people? We have the comment that you have an amazing imagination.
Oh, thank you. Oh, wait, let me check. Who's Pauline Lally. Thank you so much, Pauline. My imagination has also been outsourced slightly in that I got to work with the team of editors and people to help it maybe be a lot more palatable than it normally would be. So thank you.
Anybody else, or are we going to let Marc sneak in with another question here?
One question that I was going to ask. What are some of your friends and colleagues and yourself, like, who are some of the new authors that you're interested in these days? Maybe it's somebody back home that you're friends with. Yeah,
that's a good question. I'm totally gonna miss someone else. So I hope I don't hear. Vancouver especially has so many great authors. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to put you on the spot. So if you forget somebody,
not at all. Let's see here. Eddie Bodel-Tan, who's a local author, he recently came out with his second novel. Prolific guy. His first book came out in 2020, and his new one just came out like a couple months ago. He wrote after Alias and Rebellious Tides. I just finished Rebellious Tides, so it's kind of like psychological, literary thriller that takes place on a cruise ship. It was really, really beautifully written and very intense. So definitely recommend him. Who else? Kim Neville, the Memory Collector. She wrote a great novel. These are all local authors, like into Vancouver, I suppose, too. She wrote one called Memory Collectors, about a woman who can feel the memories of other people when she touches objects, and it takes place on Granville Island, which is really fascinating. And that was a great read. And then most recently, Ruth Ozeki. Her new book is out. So Ruth Ozeki is a great kind of author, and I like to say friend as well. And definitely an influence on me. She was kind enough to provide a blurb. And her newest book, The Book of Form and Emptiness, just came out. I guess it would have been yesterday. I managed to get an advanced copy and read it a few months ago, and it's brilliant. She wrote A Tale for the Time Being, which was shortlisted for the Booker, I believe. Yeah, and we're talking, Marc, about like kind of questions of Buddhism and spirituality, and Ruth is actually an ordained Zen Buddhist priest, and her novels, not in terms of being like theologically dense, but just in terms of the warmth and compassion radiating from them, definitely read like they were written by a Zen Buddhist priest.
Yeah, I think I quoted her off the get-go in my intro from her. I think author of Tale for the Time Being was the book that I name dropped. But
yeah, she's great.
And is she BC based as well?
She's out in the States now. I'm not sure what the situation is. She used to split her time between Vancouver Island, and then I don't want to say, I think it was Boston she was in. I could be wrong, but I think she's mostly down south now. She's teaching there at university. And then let's see, I'm trying to think any other authors I can give shout outs to. I don't know. There's so much great Canadian fiction. Oh, you know what? I just received. I haven't gone through them yet. Oh, nice. I even have them right here. I got them right here. 2 books. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, oh, yeah, Sashi Bhatt here, Most Precious Substance on Earth. Really great. I read the back of it, and I haven't started it yet, but hoping to soon. But it seems like it might resonate with people who like satellite love. It's kind of the coming of age story of a kind of odd and eccentric 14-year-old girl as she kind of goes through the whole gamut of childhood and adulthood. And then also Missed Connections here by Brian Francis. Real tearjerker. When Brian Francis was younger and in the closet before he came out, he put a Missed Connections ad out in the newspaper. And then he was too afraid to answer any of them. Then 20 years later, more having come out and more confidence, he responds to them. And it's just absolutely devastating, but like beautiful, like in a good way, devastating in a good way. So there we are. Those are my plugs.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's so many great artists, authors, musicians, filmmakers from the West Coast that sometimes, maybe just due to the geography, that don't make their way out here, or at least not as quickly, and vice versa. So yeah, it's good to get the inside scoop on some of the up and comers for sure. One thing I guess I was going to ask too, if I have time, just to sneak one more question in, is so you also grew up in is it Kyushu? Is that Kyushu. Is that right? Yeah, Kyushu. Do you are you involved in the literary community there, or and I guess my second question would be, if I can tack on another, is Satellite Love available in Japanese?
No, it's not. I'd love for it to be, though.
Okay.
I'm not. I speak. I like to think I speak quite well. I definitely speak well enough to have friends and family there, that I sustain relationships with. But I'm not confident enough to translate it on my own. Although that's not how literary translation works, anyway.
Yeah.
Not available in Japan. I'd love for it to be one day. But yeah, Kyushu, Japan. I spent a lot of my time growing up there. It was kind of like a dual identity thing, where I grew up in Calgary, Alberta. Snowy, Calgary, snowy, harsh, cold climate with very big malls and good burgers and the Stampede and pancakes and anyway, all that. But I would also spend a couple months out of every year in Kyushu, like chasing down stag beetles out in like this semi-tropic, halfway rural kind of city. So it was a very odd childhood that I quite enjoyed. And it definitely informed a lot of satellite love, especially the city Sakita, which is such a bizarre place that could only come from reality.
I feel like some of those early childhood moments are just, they're they're your go-to when you start writing, when you start coming up with ideas. And I don't know if it's just with time they kind of take on a larger than life sort of story or what it is. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool that that you have that to draw from. So that's
Yeah,
really
yeah. I
awesome.
mean, I think especially when you're trying to do something kind of instant or subconscious, like art or writing, you tend to revert back to your childhood or to this formative years. Um, I guess I see another question here as well
Yes, I
from
was just gonna,
Jamal.
yeah. So Jamal asks, mentions Gabriel Garcia Marquez thought that the novel is a poetic vision. So what do you think?
That's interesting. I think if you ask like 100 different writers and 100 different readers the same like what is a novel, obviously to get different answers. And I've read Marquez, and I think he's quite brilliant. I guess he's interesting because he writes magical realism as well, which Satellite Love is. But Satellite Love is derived more from the Japanese side of magical realism. And then when you read kind of like maybe Latin magical realism, it takes a very different tone. Especially Marquez is so, like you said there, Jamal, so poetic and so beautifully written. Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. A poetic vision. I think I'll especially tack on to the vision part there. For me, maybe I would say that a novel is more like an impulse. As in, when you get a novel, when you have an idea, it's important to power through it as fast as you can. And then you add the poetry later. So that would be my response to Marquez. I'd be open to chat if he wants to get on Twitter.
So I think we have about time for one more question, and I'm sure Marc will have one if someone in the audience doesn't. Going once, going twice. I don't know,
Going
Marc.
thrice.
Yeah. And if you don't have a question, Marc, if
Well, I don't want to set you up for like a 20-minute answer. So I'm just trying to think of something that would be.
yeah.
So
I'll keep it quick.
I'll
keep it within 3 minutes.
I'm just naturally interested in what creative people are into. So I already asked you about what you're reading. Are there any movies or shows that you're into lately that you would recommend as well?
Yeah, what have I've been really into recently is this manga called Blue Period. Maybe it's an embarrassing thing. I'm gonna claim it. I'm gonna be the first author to openly talk about reading comics. I'm not the first author to talk about that. I'm gonna be the first to talk about openly reading manga, specifically Japanese comics. There's one called Blue Period, which is really incredible. It's about art school, which I guess is why it resonates with me so much. But reading it, I'm struck by just the author's brilliant ability to characterize. I find like she writes character better than a lot of literature does. It blows me away. In terms of movies, I recently watched, I guess I've been on a vampire kick. I recently watched A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. I forget the director, but it's an Iranian vampire movie.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. It's shot in film too. It has this very old kind of warm feeling, but it just came out in like 2016 or 2015.
Yeah.
And it has Persian vampires, like it's incredible. It scratches an itch you didn't realize you had. And then also Let the Right One In.
I was just gonna say,
like they work together, but completely different films from completely different corners of the world. The next book that I'm writing isn't a vampire one, but maybe the third or fourth will be. Who knows?
Cool.
Yeah, and then I guess also like Beat Takeshi makes some great stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, if they ever get turned into movies, which I secretly hope they do, we would love to show them at the Kingston Canadian Film Festival as well. Maybe we can have you to Kingston twice in 1 year for your next book, and then you can come back.
That would be great.
Yeah, cool. Well, it was awesome getting to chat with you, Genki, and it was just such a amazing first novel, and I can't wait to see what you come up with next. And I think you've made some new fans here in Kingston, and hope to meet you in person for the next one.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for your time, Marc, and thank you, Kingston Writers Fest, for having me. And it was Novel Ideas, right? Was the bookstore?
Novel Ideas, the indie shop.
I will be there next year. Novel Ideas, hell or high water.
And
Yeah.
Genki's book is currently there for anybody looking to pick it up.
There you go. You're doing my whole plug for me, Marc.
I can do it. Any sponsors you want me to name off? Any?
Well, thank you so much to both of you again for this great conversation. So in addition to books being for sale at Novel Idea, we are doing a book giveaway throughout the festival. So everyone that registers for an event has a chance to win a book. And I want to congratulate Karina, who is the winner of a copy of Genki's Satellite Love. So we'll be getting in touch with her and she gets to savor a copy of that. And other than that, I want to thank you so much for joining us at Kingston Writers Fest for our opening night of the festival. There's lots of events still to come, so we really encourage you to check out the website at kingstonwritersfest.ca, and we'd love to see you at more of these events. Other than that, have a wonderful evening and thank you again.